A suicide attack hits a university campus in northeast Nigeria. How the upcoming administration of Donald Trump could calm the upheaval in South Sudan. And British actor Idris Elba helps to raise money for girls in Sierra Leone with an intriguing fundraising plea. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight in West Africa, where twin suicide bombing attacks on Monday have killed a professor and a child in northeast Nigeria at the University of Maiduguri. Authorities say 17 people were wounded in the blasts. The government officials say two suicide bombers blew themselves up at different entry points to the university around 5 a.m. local time. There has been no claim of responsibility, but the attacks bore the hallmarks of Boko Haram. Maiduguri is the capital of Borno State, the former stronghold of the terrorist group. Boko Haram has stepped up attacks in the area over the past few weeks as the end of the rainy season facilitates movements in the bush. Well, the coronation of Donald Trump's improbable run for the White House occurs on Friday when he is sworn in as the 45th President of the United States. His campaign pledge to wage a war on radical Islamic terrorism is about to become U.S. policy. VOA's Masood Farivar has more on Trump's number one foreign policy priority, defeating terrorism and destroying the Islamic State, in this report narrated by Mil Asega.
Another terror attack, this time in Berlin, and a sharp tweet from the president-elect. Trump wasn't always so hawkish about fighting this religious threat, but he grew increasingly bellicose during the campaign as a rash of terrorist attacks made American voters jittery about their safety. To fight terror, Trump proposed, among other things, a temporary ban on Muslims entering the U.S., a stepped-up bombing campaign against ISIS, working with Middle Eastern allies, and allying with Russia and possibly the Syrian regime. Trump outlined his anti-terror strategy in a key speech in August.
Our new approach, which must be shared by both parties in America, by our allies overseas, and by our friends in the Middle East, must be to halt the spread of radical Islam.
Blaise Mishtal of the Bipartisan Policy Center says this emphasis on ideology sets Trump apart from President Obama.
I think by seeing the threat as an ideological one, President Trump will see that the problem not just is stopping attacks, but stopping the spread of that ideology and stopping the potential for further radicalization.
Critics of Obama's refusal to acknowledge a link between Islam and terrorism have welcomed Trump's attempt to spotlight the issue, but they caution against painting the world's 1.7 billion Muslims with a broad brush. Former CIA Director Michael Hayden spoke at the Jamestown Foundation last month.
Actually, it does have something to do with Islam. A lot of it's about Islam. And I quickly add, it's not about all of Islam, and for God's sake, it's not about all Muslims.
Trump advisors do distinguish between Islam and Islamic terrorism, but they say the growing threat of terror requires a more muscular, multifaceted strategy. James Carafano is Director of Foreign Policy at the Conservative Heritage Foundation and advises the Trump transition team.
So by any objective measure, global terrorism is worse today than it was when President Obama took office. So why would any rational person assume that our counterterrorism strategy is going to be exactly the same on January 20th when we know that what we're doing now is not working?
Different, maybe, but Hayden and other experts say one thing will not change. The U.S. can't fight its way out of the war on terror. I'm Mil Asega for reporter Masood Farivar, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the Republican-led Senate is working at a feverish pace to confirm nominees that will form the inner circle President-elect Donald Trump's administration. VOA's Michael Bowman reports.
As Washington prepares to say farewell to one president,
it has been the honor of my life to serve you.
And welcome a new one.
Because on Friday, people are going to have a very good time at the inauguration.
It remains to be seen just how much of Donald Trump's cabinet will be confirmed when he enters the White House. Key Republicans have concerns about Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson's ties to Russia.
Do you believe that Vladimir Putin and his cronies are responsible for ordering the murder of countless dissidents, journalists, and political opponents.
I do not have sufficient information to make that claim.
None of this is classified, Mr. Tillerson. These people are dead.
Republicans have a one-seat majority in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. With all Democrats expected to oppose Tillerson, his nomination would be blocked if just one Republican sides against him.
If we're going to have moral clarity in our foreign policy, we need to be clear. I'm prepared to do what's right. I'm not analyzing it from a partisan standpoint.
Other nominees could be confirmed in coming days after tumultuous hearings last week. Numerous Democrats have announced their opposition to Republican Senator Jeff Sessions for Attorney General.
And if Senator Sessions is confirmed, I am deeply concerned about what will happen to citizens with disabilities, to citizens with different racial backgrounds, to citizens with different sexual orientations.
But Sessions will be confirmed if, as expected, Republicans remain united behind him.
He is a man of honor and integrity, dedicated to the faithful and fair enforcement of the law.
Some nominees are likely to be confirmed with bipartisan backing, including retired General James Mattis as Secretary of Defense.
There's a decreasing number of areas where we can engage cooperatively and an increasing number of areas where we're going to have to confront Russia.
And Congressman Mike Pompeo for CIA Director.
It's pretty clear about what took place here, about Russian involvement in efforts to hack information and to have an impact on American democracy.
As he prepares to take the oath of office, Trump is projecting confidence about his team.
So we need people that are smart. We need people that are successful. And they got successful because, generally speaking, they're smart. And that's what I put. I'm very proud of the cabinet. I think they're doing very well.
The Senate will hold a flurry of confirmation votes this week, while outside the Capitol, the finishing touches for the inauguration are completed. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
Now, there was little articulation of Donald Trump's policy for Africa during his presidential campaign, but analysts may say there may be clues to what his foreign policy may look like. Africa 54's Esther Gidhu tells us more.
As the leader of the most powerful nation on earth, President-elect Donald Trump's role will be dual, dealing with domestic issues as well as international concerns. During his presidential bid, he was very vocal about political corruption, and perhaps this may shape his policy toward countries that are at war, fueled by corruption like South Sudan. I sat down with Brian Adeba, a political analyst on South Sudan, and asked him what a Trump policy may foreshadow for South Sudan.
Political corruption is at the core of the problem in South Sudan. It is the cause of the impunity that we see. It is the cause of the war. It is the cause of the corruption, the looting of public coffers by top-level officials. So if we look at public corruption of politicians, of the political system, as a basis on which a foreign policy can be based, this is where Trump could focus his foreign policy on tackling the political corruption that is perpetuating conflict and other vices in Africa, and especially in South Sudan.
The U.S. Department of State has issued travel advisories against South Sudan, citing ongoing fighting, intercommunal violence, and violent crime. The latest one issued earlier this month. Political analysts and activists for South Sudan say there is a looming genocide in the country, and the peace process has collapsed, resulting in mass displacement of people within the country, while others seek refuge in neighboring countries. Mr. Adeba says he hopes the U.S. will intervene in this dire situation.
When you put all these factors together, the situation is really very dire, and it needs some form of intervention. And we hope that the difficult scenarios that are currently unfolding in South Sudan would be an incentive for the new administration to look at and form a basis for the foreign policy that would be required to counter those negative processes in South Sudan.
Early this month, the UN Security Council failed to adopt a U.S. draft resolution to impose an arms embargo and further sanctions on South Sudan. Adeba hopes a Trump foreign policy would put financial pressures against individuals who are fueling the conflict.
We have a war going on, and it really needs some external pressure to get the peace going in South Sudan. So Trump, we believe, in the foreign policy could focus on bringing that kind of leverage. In particular, financial pressures and targeted sanctions on individuals who are perpetuating conflict should be a focus of the new administration.
What do you think the South Sudanese in the diaspora and those back in South Sudan, in the country, would expect of a Trump presidency?
They would expect that the Trump presidency would step in and very strongly pursue principles that can bring the two sides in the conflict to the table.
Most Africans hope Trump's success as a prominent businessman who is used to initiating big deals and seeing them to completion will bring that kind of leverage in his policy for Africa, and where necessary and in partnership with the international community, exert external pressure on countries perpetuating political conflict such as South Sudan. Esther Githu-Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the president-elect of Gambia, Adama Barrow, has left the country for neighboring Senegal. That's according to a coalition member and local media. His departure came one day after the mediation mission to Banjul on Saturday, led by Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari and Liberia's President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, failed to persuade President Yahya Jammeh to step down. The Senegal government spokesman was not immediately able to confirm his arrival, which was also reported by state-owned news agency APS. Issatu Toure, a member of Barrow's coalition, did not say why Barrow had gone to Dakar, although the supporters say he felt vulnerable given a lack of security. Barrow is due to be inaugurated on January the 19th. Well, now to Central Asia, where a Turkish cargo plane crashed near Kyrgyzstan's main airport early Monday, killing at least 37 people, including children. The Boeing 747 belonging to Turkey's Act Airlines crashed into homes in a village near Manas Airport, located about 25 kilometers north of the capital Bishkek, while attempting to land in thick fog. Airport officials say the plane was making a stopover at Manas on its way from Hong Kong to Istanbul, Turkey. Authorities say most of those killed were on the ground. Kyrgyzstan's deputy prime minister told reporters the crash was caused by pilot error. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. While still to come, Kenyan girls learn to use technology to solve local challenges. Stay with us.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Welcome back. Outgoing U.S. President Barack Obama has been petitioned by a group of prominent Americans to pardon Marcus Garvey, founder of the United Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, for a 1922 conviction of a mail fraud charge, for which his sentence was later commuted by President Kevin Coolidge. To discuss the issue, I'm joined by two guests, Dr. Julius Garvey, who is the son of Marcus Garvey. He joins us by phone from Queens, New York. And here in studio we have Vivian Sitton. Her grandfather, Prince Mamolu Masquire of Liberia, was a very good friend of Garvey and assisted him with his plans to return African Americans and people from the Caribbean to Africa. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Yes, now first to Dr. Garvey. Well, this has been an ongoing petition. Let us know, why is this very, very important to you and to your family?
Well, I think it's important to 1.2 billion African people all over the world, because Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association was the stimulus for the civil rights movement here in the United States and the anti-colonial movement all over Africa and the Caribbean. And this has been certified by people such as Kwame Nkrumah, etc., Jomo Kenyatta and others, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and all over, and Nelson Mandela himself. So that, he's an important figure in terms of the struggle for liberation from colonialism, from apartheid, from racism here in the United States. And he's the progenitor, really, of Pan-Africanism of any significance. And certainly Kwame Nkrumah was a disciple of his, and he stated that, quite clearly. So Marcus Garvey is an international figure, and the charges brought against him by J. Edgar Hoover, who was a white supremacist, they were false. There was no evidence. There was an empty envelope. There was perjury on the part of the prosecutor. The judge should have recused himself. He was biased, etc., etc. So all of this has been presented in a petition to President Obama, and it sits on his desk as well as in the pardon office. So we're expecting that he will, deliver this posthumous presidential pardon.
Now, we know that President Obama has just like 3 days and then he gets out of the White House. How significant would it have been to have him pardon, or rather be the one to execute this pardon?
Well, it's significant because he stands on the shoulders of those who have gone before. He knows that. He knows that if there was no civil rights movement, there would be no Obama in terms of sitting in the Senate and in terms of becoming president of the United States. If there was no Marcus Garvey, there would have been no civil rights movement in that sense. Yeah. And, in terms of Marcus Garvey himself, and of course, right now we're celebrating, the birth and the life and legacy of Martin Luther King. And he said in 1965, while he was in Jamaica, Marcus Garvey's birthplace, he said, "You gave Marcus Garvey to the United States of America." And he gave to the millions of Negroes in the United States a sense of personhood, a sense of manhood, and a sense of somebodyness. To King, Garvey was the first man of color in the history of the United States to lead and develop a mass movement. Okay. He was the first man on a mass scale and level to give millions of Negroes a sense of dignity and destiny and make the Negro feel that he was somebody. Right. So this is his legacy.
All right, just stay on the line. I want to turn to Vivian here in studio. Your grandfather was a very special friend to Marcus Garvey. Just briefly tell us why this is very personal to you.
Well, it's very personal to me because of my family connection to Prince Mamolu Massaquoi. And also it is important to me because as a professor of history, we have studied all of these movements, and I came to realize that the liberation of the black man today and the possibility for a black man to become president of the United States of America goes back to the Pan-African movement of almost 150 years ago, when many black Americans, William Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Bishop Stokes, Bishop Rembrandt, Bishop Phillips got together to focus the attention of the black man in America on Africa. And Prince Mamolu Massaquoi was a part of this movement.
And he was actually also investigated along with Marcus Garvey for a crime that they were, supposed to be charged with, but he was found to be not guilty of any of those charges, right?
Yes. J. Edgar Hoover said to the public and to the president at the time that African prince is harmless. So he exonerated my grandfather. Mm-hmm. But he prosecuted Garvey. Later on, Garvey, his sentence was commuted not for him to serve time in jail, but he was deported back to Jamaica, where he eventually died.
Just going back to New York, Dr. Garvey said, Thursday comes, nothing happens. What next then?
Well, we don't have plans for that at the present time, but, we feel that what we have done, so far has brought the issue back up into the public view. And we think that this will happen, hopefully by Wednesday, and not waiting till the last day, and that President Obama will see this as a part of his own legacy as he goes back into the life of an ordinary American citizen and focuses more on his community work, etc., as he did in Chicago before he became president. I think there's a connection there, and hopefully this will be adequate for him to see that connection himself, and then make a move in terms of the executive effort.
Now, Vivian, most people probably don't know about this. Perhaps some are learning about this. Does it really matter to many who may not realize that there is something like this around hanging on the reputation of Marcus Garvey?
Yes, I think it's important because we're trying to tell this young generation and future young generations that the liberation of the black man is still an agenda on the table, and we want to see that our youngsters have a sense of self, have a sense of dignity. And how can we say we have a sense of dignity when the man who fought for us has a charge still looming over his name?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much to both of you, Dr. Garvey and Ms. Sitton. Dr. Julius Garvey is the son of civil rights activist Marcus Garvey, and Vivian Sitton is the granddaughter of Prince Mamadou Massaquoi of Liberia, who was a friend of Marcus Garvey. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. An award-winning British actor wants to be your Valentine for a course. We'll be right back.
Chairperson of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State, to help us resolve this impasse peacefully through the courts.
The President Museveni came to power, spirits would enable her. There had been skirmishes between his forces and hers.
It was more of an emotional thing than anything else. There was a lot of hysteria, attachments.
Well, you're with Africa 54 right now, and we're supposed to have Haiti, Adams Fitzpatrick to do What's Trending.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Let's take a look at what's trending. Well,
Hi there, Idris Elba here, and I'd like you to be my Valentine. That's right, love. Just you and me, no one else around, just us. All you have to do is go to amaze.com/Idris. Now, every entry to join me on this ride.
yeah, you're not dreaming, ladies. This is a real thing. Award-winning British actor Idris Elba is auctioning himself off for a very special Valentine's Day date. By donating money to charity We Can Lead, you can become eligible to win a candlelit meal with the actor. Proceeds will help finance the charity's aim of offering mentorship and educational support to teenage girls in Sierra Leone. The charity's founder says the response response to the campaign has so far been overwhelming, and we wonder why. Well, with everything going digital these days, could food be next? Well, a team of engineers at Columbia University in New York think so. They're working with chefs to create a 3D home food printing machine and a culinary revolution. This device is simultaneously printing and cooking a delicate multi-layered triangular cookie that looks more like a sculpture than something designed to be eaten. Well, people with specific food allergies to the more health-conscious might be the future users of the 3D home food printer. They'll be able to buy cartridges and print their own low-calorie bread or sugar-free cake. And that is what's trending today. Vincent, it's back to you.
Well, and that's it for today on What's Trending. Let's turn to East Africa. A new initiative seeks to empower girls in Kenya's shanty towns by teaching them to use technology to solve local challenges. Now, business skills and design are some of the courses being taught. Lenny Rovaga has more from Nairobi.
24-year-old Minzelet Ijai takes her students through the paces in film production. We are in Kibera, an informal settlement, low-income area on the outskirts of Nairobi. Today's lesson is on directing and script writing.
Action, move!
Ijai is a tutor at Tech Dada. In Swahili, Dada means sister. Formed 2 years ago, Tech Dada teaches girls in informal settlements, business and technology skills. Ijai is a graduate of the 3-month program who now works there as a mentor.
The challenges that I face personally when I'm training these young girls is that most of them see these film directing as a male thing, not as ladies who can direct films. So I have to work hard to make sure that they're interested and then spread the knowledge to them.
University wasn't in the cards for Elizabeth Ochieng. She couldn't afford it. But through Tech Dada, she learned about web design and 3D printing and now has a job teaching graphic design at a local school. She hopes the skills gained here will lead to self-employment for her students once they finish high school. But the program isn't without its challenges.
We lack materials, computers, we don't have adequate computers, and also maybe some students can't attend the classes, like they have some responsibilities at home. So we need maybe parents to fully support us so that we can help the girls grow.
Josephine Meliza is the founder of Tech Dada, which is funded by the Tunapanda Institute.
There is really great potential in the informal settlements. We look around, we see how people are able to turn challenges into opportunities, and sometimes it's just the lack of opportunities that makes people resort to crime. So for us, when we look at this as an opportunity.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Most people enjoy listening to music. But is this expression actually about songs and tunes?
Music to my ears.
Jonathan, I cannot believe we have to work over the weekend.
Did you not hear the news? The meeting for the project got canceled. No work this weekend after all.
Awesome! That is music to my ears. Now I'll have a chance to catch up on my latest book.
You say something is music to your ears when you hear good news or just news that makes you happy. Music is pleasant to listen to. That is where this expression comes from. In our example, learning that she didn't have to work on the weekend was music to Anna's ears. And that's English in a Minute.